Hey everybody, it's Tyler Austin. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're going to be doing a zero comparison for the 545 by 39. We're going to be comparing the 25, 50, and 100 yard zero. I did this exact thing with the 762 by 39 last week. And just like that video, I'm going to be using a very vanilla example, just comparing these zeros out of your basic AK74, shooting 52 grain 7N6 with a muzzle velocity of roughly 2,900 feet per second. So understand that if your setup's a little bit different, and especially in regards to barrel length and ammunition choice, your ballistic trajectories will differ from this. So you can just plug in your specific data to some free online shooting calculator, and it'll give you a rough estimate of what your holdovers will be. So with that being said, let's dive right on into it. All right, so let's take a look at a 25 yard zero. At 25 yards, our point of aim is going to be point of impact, of course, because it's a 25 yard zero. Now understand that anything below 25 yards, you are going to impact slightly low depending on the specific range that you're at and your particular height over bore. And that's going to be dependent on whether or not you're using irons or an optic and how high that optic sits up over the bore. So understand your height over bore. At 50 yards, you're going to be roughly 1.5 inches high. At 100 yards, you're going to be 4 inches high. So on a normal human being, if you're aiming high center of mass, at 100 yards, you're going to impact somewhere in the throat area. At 200 yards, you're going to be 5.5 inches high, which will impact them somewhere in the chin area. At 300 yards, your point of aim, point of impact is going to be roughly the same. This is why it's commonly referred to as a 25 300 yard zero. At 400 yards, you're going to be roughly 12.5 inches low. So again, on a normal human being, if you're aiming high center of mass, that's going to impact them somewhere slightly below the belly button region. And at 500 yards, you are going to impact somewhere, you're going to impact 35 inches low, and that's going to be somewhere in the knee area. So at 500 yards, if you want to get a good effective hit somewhere in the torso, you're going to have to aim about, you're going to have to hold over roughly half that individual's height over their head in order to get around again somewhere in the torso at 500 yards. One of the benefits of a 25 yard zero is that basically from 0 to 400 yards, if you aim high, somewhere high center of mass, you're going to impact them somewhere in the torso and neck and face area. One of the downsides to the 25 yard zero is that, especially at 100 and 200 yards, you're going to have a fairly significant upward trajectory from your point of aim. So if you want a higher percentage shot, i.e. You want to hit them somewhere in the high torso region rather than trying to hit them in the neck or face, which are obviously much smaller targets, you're going to have to do a slight hold under by about 4 or 5 inches. So understand that. So yeah, that is the 25 yard zero. Now let's move on to the 50 yard zero. So at 25 yards, you're going to be roughly 1 inch low. At 50 yards, point of aim, point of impact, of course. And at 100 yards, you're going to be about 1 inch high. At 200 yards, you're going to be 1 inch low. And at 300 yards, you're going to be roughly 10 inches low, so right around the belly button area. At 400 yards, you're going to be 26 inches low, so that's going to be, depending on the height of the individual, very bottom of the groin area / top of the thighs. So if you want a good effective hit in the torso, you're going to have to hold over roughly the length of their torso over their head. And at 500 yards, you're going to be 52 inches low. So again, depending on the height of the individual, that's basically going to be impacting around the bottom of their shins. So at 500 yards, you're going to have to hold over roughly the height of the individual in order to get around somewhere in the torso. One of the advantages of a 50 yard zero is that at 0 to 200 yards, your point of aim, point of impact shift is very minimum. I mean, you're talking about a 2 inch spread, which is really nice. So basically you don't have to worry about holdovers or hold unders at all from 0 to 200 yards. Even at 300 yards, it's only about a 10 inch shift. So again, even if you hold center mass and don't hold over, you're still going to get a good effective hit in the torso. The disadvantage to a 50-yard zero is that at more extended ranges, particularly 400, 500 and out, you're going to have a much higher drop-off, or a much more significant drop-off, and therefore you're going to have more significant holdovers. So it's basically a trade-off. Basically no holdovers at shorter ranges. However, you're trading that for more significant holdovers at longer ranges. And finally, the 100-yard zero. So at 25 yards, you're going to be roughly an inch low. This is going to deviate a little bit depending on your specific height over bore. At 50 yards, you are going to be roughly a ½ inch low. And at 100 yards, point of aim, point of impact, of course. At 200 yards, you're going to be about 3 inches low. And at 300 yards, you are going to be 12 inches low. So again, if you're aiming high center of mass, 12 inches low is going to be right around the belly button area. At 400 yards, you are going to be 29 inches low. So basically somewhere in the top of the thighs. So for a good torso hit, you're going to have to aim. You're going to have to hold over roughly their torso length. And at 500 yards, 59 inches low, so somewhere in the shin area. So you're going to have to hold over roughly their height for a good torso hit at 500 yards. Similar to the 50-yard zero, the 100-yard zero does really good at kind of shorter ranges, because at 0 to 200 yards, your point of aim, point of impact deviation is about a 3-inch spread. And from 0 to 300 yards, if you aim high center of mass without any holdovers, you're going to hit somewhere in the torso, which again is really good. Just like the 50-yard zero, however, at longer distances, you're going to have more significant drop-offs and therefore more significant holdovers. So again, just like we discussed in the 50-yard zero, it's a give and take. Less deviation at shorter ranges with more significant drop-offs and holdovers at longer ranges. So that's the 100-yard zero. So that's what you can expect out of the 545 by 39 with different zeros at different ranges. Again, remember this was just a very vanilla example and your particular setup will differ. Interestingly enough, the 545 and the 556 have a very similar ballistic trajectory. So if you have a 556 AK, this will be roughly the same. Depending on the particular ammo you are using, of course, and barrel length and all that. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something out of this, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Just like what I said in the 762 video, I highly suggest you don't pick your zero based off what somebody on the internet said or what some instructor uses, or based off what somebody said is the best zero. Base it off of your personal preferences and your particular environment and AO, because each zero has their particular pros and cons. So for example, I live in New Hampshire, very woodland, very hilly, so it's unlikely to get a shot off past 200 yards. So I'd probably be better served using a 50 or a 100-yard zero that has a smaller deviation at those shorter ranges. However, if you live in a much more open environment, like the Nevada desert or something, you might be better served with a 100-yard zero that does better at more extended ranges. So something to keep in mind. So yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'm Tyler Austin. Thank you so much for watching.